Person shall applaud participants in debate or engage in conversation or behavior that may disrupt the proceedings of the meeting. So we do have 8 registered delegations and 1 presentation on tonight's agenda. And we did receive 1 late delegation requesting to speak to item 7.1, gender-based and intimate partner violence. So prior to moving into delegations, we'll need a motion to waive the rules to allow for the late presentation to the delegate. So do we have a motion to waive the rules? Mayor Davis, and seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Any discussion? And reminding the committee that this will require a 2/3 vote. If the motion to waive the rule carries, our procedural bylaw will allocate 1 hour for delegations. And as there will be 9, each delegate will get 6.5 minutes each to address the committee. So, Madam Clerk, we'll call the vote.
Thank you. The motion to waive the rules to allow the late delegate carries on a recorded vote of 11-0. All those voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Celeste McCreary, Carpenter, Samuel, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sequoia, Mayor Davis.
Perfect. So I will invite first, we have Monil Jethpa to come forward, and you can just have a seat here and push the button. When the mic lights up red, you're ready to speak. I will advise you that you have 6.5 minutes, and that's inclusive of questions from the committee, okay? And you're speaking today to the Active Transportation Master Plan, correct?
Yeah.
Very good.
Through the chair, hello members of the council. My name is Monil Jethpa and I'm the Vice President of Conestoga Students Incorporated, or CSI for short. CSI is the official student association of Conestoga College and represents over 40,000 students, including approximately 3,000 students at our Bramford campus. Our advocacy efforts is guided by the pillars of accountability, affordability, equity, and sustainability. This has brought me here today as a representative of the students of Conestoga to voice our support, as well as a few key considerations for the Brantford Active Transportation Master Plan. Overall, we are pleased to see the vast strides the city of Brantford is making to support active transportation, particularly regarding the proposed improvements to Brantford's cyclist network. At CSI, we believe that no form of transportation is as sustainable or affordable as active transportation in the form of walking, running, and cycling. With cycling in particular playing a key role in any sustainable transportation strategy. As the report outlines, Brantford's existing cyclist network has no dedication lanes in the downtown core where Conestoga's campus is located. It poses many barriers and safety concerns to students and employees alike who might otherwise wish to bike in the downtown core. As the downtown core is currently on an approved truck route as well, this need for extra protection is of little surprise. Overall, many factors impact the seriousness of collisions, including speed, weight, and type of vehicle. The larger and faster a vehicle is, the more likely the collision is to be fatal. Larger vehicles are designed with passenger safety in mind, not the pedestrians, and the size means crashes are likely to hit with more force. They hit higher up on the body and have a harder time stopping faster. Therefore, given not only the presence of commercial shipping trucks in the downtown core, but also personal vehicles that continue to increase in size and weight, CSI Health was pleased to see that there are more comprehensive protection planned and prioritized for the downtown core, such as cycle tracks. Indeed, bike infrastructure like the proposed cycle tracks not only serve to protect cyclists, but can have broader positive impacts on the community as a whole. For example, from 2000 to 2013, the New York City Department of Transportation found that the introduction of bike lanes reduced the risk of pedestrian injuries by 40%. It increased the value of properties adjacent to the bike lanes. It increased the number of customers and sales for businesses. It also improved individual health and reduced greenhouse gas emissions, to name just a few impacts. All of this is to say that while bike lanes' intended purpose is to protect cyclists, they go beyond that purpose in many more positive ways. As active transportation methods and infrastructure improves, we as a community reap vast benefits, regardless of if we walk, bike, or drive. For those who are biking, though, a key consideration is the need for bike, scooter, and other active transportation, parking, and storage. As noted in the original report, we are pleased to see the City of Brantford understanding this need as a way to develop further partnerships, both private and public. We asked the City of Brantford that in their development of active transportation, parking, and storage, they consider the need for covered or semi-enclosed parking as well as charging stations to support e-devices in high traffic areas and at key public facilities. On the note of e-devices as a form of active transportation, we were also thrilled to see the City of Brantford's interest in bike share programs, including e-bike and e-scooters. With campus locations in Waterloo region, some Conestoga students have already been experiencing the benefits of these programs. These programs will also be welcomed by Brantford campus students. In fact, in CSI's 2022 year-end survey, almost 45% of Brantford students said that they were either likely to use a bike share program if it was available to them. Given this high percentage, we encourage the City of Brantford to continue investigating and pursue programs that provide these desired services. Cycling may be the most effective and efficient mode of active transit in terms of sheer speed. However, it's not the only one. Though some attention is given to pedestrian infrastructure, it is much more limited in scope compared to the bike infrastructure development plans. Though pedestrians have a much more robust existing infrastructure and will benefit from the proposed cyclist infrastructure, there are some unaddressed pedestrian-focused concerns we maintain and hope to see addressed. In the report, laddered crossing are noted for both signalized and unsignalized intersection to be used in special cases. With school as an example, though schools are typically only thought of in terms of elementary and secondary schools, we encourage the City of Brantford to include post-secondary institutions in their understanding of schools to acknowledge the high traffic nature of both pedestrians and vehicles in these areas. Furthermore, though various snow clearing concerns were noted, such as piles at intersections, ice, and inconsistent residential clearing, we hope to see further attention and consideration given to these issues and how they will be addressed. Given the various safety concerns that these issues cause, as well as Conestoga's high international student population who may be unfamiliar with the dangers associated with the Canadian winter, these maintenance issues and how they will be addressed remain a key concern. CSI is invested in advocating that students are provided with access to an affordable, accessible, and widely used transit options that can assist students in exploring their communities, exercising, which has also been noted with benefits towards mental health and overall well-being, and accessing employment and cultural opportunities that may be beyond their reach currently.
15 seconds left.
Given the numerous benefits, I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to speak to you all today on the overwhelmingly positive impact of these proposed changes that can have on not just on Conestoga students, but the community more broadly. I, along with the rest of the CSI team, look forward to a continued partnership with the City of Brantford. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We're out of time, so we're not going to be available for any questions, but if you have a seat, we're going to deal with this item first thing in the agenda, okay? Thank you so much. And next, I'll welcome Matthew Vandering to come up. We're speaking to the same item, which is the active transportation master plan. And just a reminder, Matthew, 6.5 minutes. Okay, I'll give you a little warning. If you, there you go.
Yep, there we go. Thank you. Good evening, City Councilors, Mr. Mayor, City staff, and fellow guests here. My name is Matthew Vandering, and I'm a longtime resident of Brantford, living, working, and raising my family here. I'm also a cyclist, commuting to work by bike on a daily basis, 12 months per year. I'm here today to share my support for the active transportation master plan as presented by city staff. I would like to see this master plan received by council, and I hope that council will eagerly direct city staff to implement the active transportation system. I believe there is a clear hierarchy in modes of transportation which best serve a city. Number one is walking. Number two, cycling and other forms of micromobility, such as electric scooters. Number three, public transit. Number four, automobiles. I base this belief on many factors, including safety, affordability, and livability. My observation of Brantford's current state is that it prioritizes automobiles above all else. Cars are dangerous, expensive, loud, and ugly. So why do we all use them? I myself do have a car, should confess. Why do we all use them? Because nearly all of our transit infrastructure has been built for cars. This didn't happen by accident. Cities do not grow organically. We have designed ourselves into a car-infested mess, and we will need to design ourselves out of it. Adding bike lanes, multi-use paths, and sidewalks to our cityscape will enable and encourage residents to travel throughout the city using alternative modes of transportation. Cities around the world with the highest quality of life enable residents to travel without a car. I believe this is objectively true, and anyone who has experienced a human-focused city design instead of a car-focused city design would have to agree. This isn't controversial or even political, but just somewhat inconvenient given our current state. Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, famously said, "A developed country is not a place where the poor have cars, it's where the rich use public transportation." I personally would expand on this by including active transportation as well, which brings me to my next point, dignity. Infrastructure elevates human dignity. There is something altogether degrading about existing on many of Brantford City's streets outside of a car. It feels somewhat humiliating to walk or bike down King George Road. It is terribly unpleasant to cross Wayne Gretzky Parkway in front of the Linden Park Mall. Even Brant Ave, which contains most of Brantford's beautiful architecture, is far too busy with vehicular traffic to enjoy by foot or by bike. Slow traffic, quiet cars, and proper infrastructure to accommodate pedestrians, cyclists, and others using micromobility gives everyone a sense of place, a sense of belonging, a sense of comfort, a sense of dignity. Brantford needs to implement the active transportation master plan to elevate our standard of living and demonstrate that it is keeping all residents in mind, not only those who drive cars. I would encourage council to get behind this plan, regardless of the political cost, which may come with implementation. But please, I'm asking City Council to see the big picture, as this will be beneficial for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And we do have 3 minutes left, and I see Mayor Davis has some questions for you.
Matthew, thank you very much for coming out tonight. I'm going to put some statements to you that I often hear when it comes to bike lanes, and I want your response.
Sure.
So these are statements I often hear. I never see anybody using a bike lane for those that are separated by paint or separated lanes. So why do we have them?
So that's a really good point. I would say, first of all, I do use them. I use North Park almost every day, and which is a nice one. And I do see other people on them. They're not used as much as I wish they would. I would say the reason why they're not used is because the bike lanes don't cover the whole city. If you have to bike, if I'm going to bike to Linden Park Mall from my house, I can bike down North Park, but then I end up on Fairview and there's no bike lane there. So then I'm kind of on my own. I'm either on the road or on the sidewalk. And I think this does deter people from using them.
And how do you feel when you're riding a bike on a busy road like Fairview? Because you're trying to bridge the gap between bike lanes. And
Yeah.
how do you feel when
Yeah.
you're doing that?
Yeah, very like overly alert, I would say. Like it requires a very, very high level of situational awareness to bike on a road like Fairview that I think is just, it's kind of too demanding for just the average person. You kind of need to bike with conviction versus say when you drive, you don't drive with conviction, you just drive because that's the way you're going to get there. And I think in other places in the world, you would just bike somewhere with the same mentality of you can go to La La Land and just end up in your destination. And you just can't do that on a road like Fairview.
Okay. Here's another one. No one in their right mind would ever use a bike or a scooter in the winter.
Oh, I love riding in the winter. I think it's wonderful. I'm usually cold for about 30 seconds, but once I'm pedaling, I'm warm. I do use studded tires. I've never fallen once. I've been doing this for years.
And lastly, people only use it for fun. You wouldn't take a bike to go shopping or doing anything like that. You
Oh.
carry something.
It's,
Take that one
yeah,
off.
that's, I mean, yeah, I think that's just a real loss for Brantfordtonians and just people in North America in general, that so few of us can run errands with a bike. I live in Terrace Hill neighborhood. So one of my favorite things to do is a wine run on a Friday night, go to Metro, pick up a bottle of wine. I can't think of a better way to like start the weekend with a bike ride and running an errand.
And do you use some kind of carriers or baskets?
Yeah, I do. I think they're called panniers or something like that. They're bags that hang on the rack, and I have like a front basket. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That concludes our time
Thank you.
for you. Thank you for taking the time to come out. All right, we're going to move forward into a different topic. So I'm going to invite Christine Wildman. And Tara, are you coming up or no? Okay. So Christine, come forward to begin. You can just click the button on the mic. When it turns red, it's all yours. And just a reminder, you have 6.5 minutes inclusive of questions.
Hello. My name is Christine Wildman. I use she, they pronouns. I'm not going to take 6 minutes. There's lots of experts behind me that are going to speak on this matter. But I'm here to emphasize the importance of declaring intimate partner violence and gender-based violence an epidemic. An epidemic is something that can be described as affecting or tending to affect a disproportionately large number of individuals within a population, community, or region at the same time. And according to Statistics Canada, almost half of all Canadian women and 54% of 2S LGBTQIA+ folks have experienced intimate partner violence. And so I'm here as a resident of Brantford and as a survivor of family violence. I spent much of my childhood not knowing if my mom, myself, my siblings would wake up in the morning. I grew up in a house that felt like a war zone. And I spent the first 20 years of my life living in terror and in survival mode. I was the protector of my family rather than the child that I deserved to be. And since then, I've spent my entire adult life working to address intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and all forms of gender-based violence. As an adult, I felt fairly sure that I could escape the grips of gender-based violence. But the truth is, it's pervasive. It affects people of all gender, races, classes, backgrounds, ages, and it disproportionately affects marginalized communities. Indigenous women, trans women, and non-binary people are disproportionately affected. And as a queer person in this community, I continue to experience various forms of gender-based violence on a fairly regular basis. So, well, the request for this declaration comes, you know, at a professional level for me. It comes at a very personal level as well. I think it's a crucial step to bringing attention and awareness to the problem. It emphasizes a commitment to eradicating violence and creating safer and more equitable community. So making this declaration provides an opportunity to collaborate, to provide information and resources, to reduce stigma, and to promote a cultural change by challenging harmful norms and attitudes that perpetuate violence in the first place. So I'm very happy to be here today and look forward to seeing what the other folks say.
Thank you so much, Christine. And can you do me a favor for a learning opportunity for the committee? Can you just help define the difference between gender-based and intimate partner?
Right. So intimate partner violence is violence that occurs within an intimate relationship or closely connected to one. So an ex of somebody can perpetrate intimate partner violence, and gender-based violence is more broadly systematic and systemic violence that happens in society based on someone's gender or perceived gender.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions for you from the committee, so we are finished. We're going to deal with this shortly, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how to shut it off.
It's fine. Next, we're going to invite Penny McVicker. Penny's here from Victim Services of Brant, and she's going to be speaking to gender-based and intimate partner violence.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for having me here. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to everyone. I'm the Executive Director of Victim Services at Brant, and I've been in that position since 1998. So I've had an opportunity to watch a lot of the changes that have happened in Brantford, especially around victims of crime and victims of intimate partner violence and other gender-based violence. And I looked back at our stats for our agency. And I look back at 2012 to 2013. For that year, we had 258 victims of intimate partner violence. In 2022 to 2023, we had 591 victims of intimate partner violence. That's a significant increase over the course of 10 years. I looked at criminal harassment. Criminal harassment usually is some form of intimate partner violence that's taking place. In 2012, 2013, I had 55 cases. In 2022, 2023, I had 73. Human trafficking was just at the forefront 10 years ago, so we didn't have any cases then. Last year, we had 22 cases of human trafficking in our community. Sexual assault. In 2012, 2013, we had 55 victims that we supported. In 2022, 2023, we had 80. And making it even worse, in 2021 to 2022, the year previous, we had 107 sexual assault victims that we supported. And I'm seeing it increasing again even this year. We're more than halfway. I got the stats up until September of this year, and we're already over 300 victims of intimate partner violence in 2023, 2024. It's a concern to me. It's a problem in our community. I was here in 2005 when we had 3 domestic related homicides within 1 week, or 2 weeks, I should say. That was a horrible time in our community. And we did a lot of work as a community to try and address those issues. We had a mayor's task force. We had a lot of other things that were going on to try and reduce some of those incidents of intimate partner violence and domestic violence, as they were called back then. But I think we kind of lost our way in the last couple of years. We aren't paying the attention to it that we should. We need to pay attention to it. We have our families, not only, when I'm talking about as women, I'm not talking about the number of children that are represented by each one of those victims. And I would say the majority of those victims do have children. So we're looking at problems in the schools. We're looking at problems for the police services, for the community agencies, and we need to do more. And as one of the co-chairs of the BRAVE committee, I wanted to be here to let you know what we're seeing in our office and to make sure that you recognized how important it is that this resolution get passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. We do have one question from Counselor
Sure.
Van Tilburg.
Hi, your stats really caught me off guard on the significant increase, in some circumstances almost doubling.
Mhm.
Is it people more willing to report, or is it that we have a cultural change happening out there that is leading to the increase? Or what is your opinion that you can give me? Thanks.
I think it's a combination of both of those factors. I think we have a lot of really good agencies in our community. We have, Nova Vita, we have Victim Services, we have the Sexual Assault Center, we have a great domestic violence sexual assault care team at the hospital. We've got really good services, so people do come forward maybe a little bit easier. But I think it's more than that. I think that it's just, and if they are reporting, then that's great, but still the numbers are too high. Either way, whether it's because of, things are getting worse in our community, there's always concerns financially and other issues. COVID obviously brought a lot of issues to the forefront. But either way, we have a problem and we need to address it.
And we have another question for you, Penny, from Counselor Carpenter.
Hi, Penny. Nice to see you. Are all the agencies sufficiently funded to educate and to represent?
No. No.
I know that's the answer, but we need to hear it, so.
We all struggle. I know that Joanna and Natasha struggle as well, but it's really hard. Like some of my frontline staff, I can't pay them more than $20 an hour. Did you see what they just raised the minimum wage to? Why does somebody want to work for $20 an hour when they're dealing 24/7, they're dealing with high trauma, they're supporting people that post-secondary trauma, all of those things. It's hard to keep staff when you're working under those situations, when you don't have pensions, you don't have benefits, you don't have any of those things. It's a big issue, and it's something that
So if I could.
my network is talking with MCCS about.
Okay. And could all the group actually, all the agencies get together and present to us as council what your financial needs are so that we can assist in lobbying the provincial government for the proper funding for our community?
I can guarantee that we can do that.
Thank you. I do that. Thanks.
If we pass this resolution this evening, that's exactly what we'll be doing.
Yeah.
And Mayor Davis, you have 1 minute.
Hi, Penny. What have you seen the impact of the pandemic to have been?
Well, for one thing, most agencies were closed down over the pandemic or providing limited services. We were very actively working throughout the pandemic. We were still going out and taking safety devices and things like that to people's houses. I think a lot of people stuck where they were during the pandemic because there was no place to go. And there was also a fear if they left, where would they end up? A lot of abusers used that as a control mechanism during the pandemic, which made the situations that they were living in even more difficult. And we're still seeing the aftermath of that. I think all of our agencies are.
Okay. One last question for you. So you're pretty close to the justice system. Do you think bail reform, is that an issue when it comes to
Yeah.
this type of intimate violence? Is that something we should also be concerned about?
I think it's something we need to be very concerned about. We talk about it as catch and release. And we see so many victims of intimate partner violence that are repeatedly victimized. Their abuser gets arrested, gets charged. They have a no contact order, not to go to the residence, not to, have contact with the victim or, oftentimes children. And they repeatedly reoffend. They get picked up, they get charged with breaches and new incidents, and they're out the next day again. Sometimes they don't even get held for bail. And it's a big problem in the justice system. And it puts victims of intimate partner violence at great risk because they never feel safe.
Thank you so much, Penny. We're all out of time, but thank you so much for answering everyone's questions.
Thank you.
Next we have Pam Mallins. And a reminder, you have 6.5 minutes. We've already talked. You're probably not going to use all of that, but thank you for coming out. If you just push the button there, it'll light up red. There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hello, members of the council. I also wish to provide my support for the resolution on intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. I'll be speaking to more of the latter. I come to you as a professor at Laurier Brantford in the Faculty of Education that just started last year at the Brantford campus. I also come to you as a resident of Brantford who also grew up in Brantford. So I'm happy to now find myself working at the university. I'm also someone who identifies as part of the queer community. So from those points of view, I am very open with my students, and I was a teacher both in Brantford and actually in London. And so I'm happy to hear that Brantford is considering adding gender-based violence and intimate partner violence as an epidemic for our particular city. I think it's really important, especially knowing that we have the Faculty of Education and our candidates to support. So basically, I can bring to you the fact that I hear a lot of stories about gender-based violence through my work and research, especially, I mean, this is a very timely meeting given the protest that recently happened that did not want to see SOGI curriculum, for those of you, sexual orientation, gender identity discussed in schools. And I'd like to think that Brantford could be a space where teacher candidates feel supported in schools, especially those that have identities that are non-binary or trans, and they can feel safe to be a teacher candidate in our school boards or in our school board. And I'd also like to think that they know how to support our students as well, and know that in our city, this is something we're taking seriously. And they know that gender-based violence and any hateful acts against it are not tolerated. So furthermore, next term, I'll be teaching us a course that's called Queer Studies in Education. And I'm a little concerned given what happened in Waterloo campus. I definitely just want to know that our city is aware that there's a lot of violence that still permeates the city, and that it doesn't always feel safe for everyone. And so I think it's important that we take up this as an issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pam, for coming out and sharing your story. I don't see any questions from the committee. So thank you so much for coming out, and we'll be discussing this shortly. Next, I'm going to call up Leslie Jocelyn and Vicky Hartman from Willowbridge. Just Leslie, okay. And I've said this a million times, but 6.5 minutes inclusive of questions.
Okay, good. Good evening. I'm Leslie Josling. I'm the Executive Director of Willowbridge Community Services. Willowbridge is a developmental service and counseling agency here in Brantford. I'm a psychotherapist by training, and my entire 35-year career has been spent addressing gender-based violence. During that time, it has been gratifying to witness a gradual decline in gender-based violence and feminicide in Canada until recently, that is. The Canadian Feminicide Observatory reported a shocking 27% increase in feminicide between 2018 and 2022. There's now a death in Canada every 48 hours. Further, in 2023, Stats Canada ranked Brantford as the Canadian city with the highest incidence of domestic violence. Willowbridge has been offering women's services since its inception in 1914, when we supported women who had been widowed by World War I and the Spanish flu. We gave them microloans, and we started the first childcare services in Brantford. In 1982, the Ontario government recognized our expertise in dealing with gendered issues and granted us violence against women funding so that we could deliver individual, family, and group counseling for women who had experienced gender-based violence. We've been doing this successfully now for 40 years, and we've been offering psychotherapy to women and their children who have experienced current or historic abuse or sexual assault. Left unaddressed, we know that gender-based violence has profound and lasting implications for the women who've experienced it and their children. Their experience of trauma can result in attachment injury that plays itself out for decades to come in their inability to form satisfying personal relationships. Yet Willowbridge has experienced a staggering, and this is mirrored in other people's reports as well, 298% increase in demand for our counseling service in the last 4 years. The consequences are grim. Women and children continue to live in violence, and the chance to heal remains out of reach while they're languishing on a waiting list. As I mentioned, in addition to offering counseling, Willowbridge also offers developmental services for people living with developmental disability. Of grave concern for us at Willowbridge are the alarming rates of gender-based violence amongst women who live with developmental disability. They report outrageous levels of violence. And according to Stats Canada, 65% of these women have experienced intimate partner violence as adults. And catch this, another study says that 80% of women, children, have experienced sexual assault by the time they're 18. On a personal note, I am the mother of a young woman, she's here today, with a rare genetic disorder called Noonan syndrome. Megan lives with developmental disability and seizure disorder. She sometimes had hundreds of seizures a day as a child. And at age 14, she experienced sexual assault by a 21-year-old man while riding the school bus. Her disclosure was met with disbelief by many. It resulted in her being increasingly withdrawn, sullen, and anxious. She'd lock herself in the bathroom to avoid going to school. And when male visitors came over to the house, she would avoid them if they sat on the couch with her. She and I accessed therapy 3 times together before she regained her confidence and her well-being, and could once again feel safe with men. Today, she's an empowered, confident young woman because she received treatment, good professional treatment in her moment of need. Yet those services were only available to us because I had the means to pay for private counseling. Without treatment, she would have continued to live in perpetual fear and been unable to lead a good life. She asked me to share her story today in the hopes that no one ever has to go through what she went through, and that treatment is readily available to all women. I appeal to the City of Brantford to take the issue of gender-based violence seriously, joining other municipalities in declaring it an epidemic. Further, Willowbridge calls for the experiences of disabled women and girls to be explicitly recognized and to ensure timely, responsive service access. We urge you to join us in advocating for more awareness and to support us in continuing to address these grave issues. Thank you.
Any questions from the member of the committee? Seeing none, I thank you so much. And I thank your, sorry, Councillor Hunt.
Leslie, thank you for coming. The statistic that jumped out at me is that 289% increase in the demand for your services. And I'm sure that you have not received a 289% increase in your funding. So where does that leave someone who is at their most vulnerable and actually has the strength to come forward and say that I need some help as a result of gender-based or intimate partner violence, and they're then put on a wait list? What does that do to that person?
Yeah, there's so many layers to the answering that. As far as I know, our agency has not received, our violence against women services have not received a single cost of living increase in 20 years. That we continue to be required to deliver the same service targets as we were 20 years ago. And you don't have to have a PhD in business to know that that's not a sustainable model. So what ends up happening is that women languish on waiting lists. We also know if we're able to see people in their moment of need, that we capitalize on what we call clinically readiness to change. And readiness to change predicts better outcomes. If we can strike when the iron's hot, we know clinically that people are more motivated and more ready, and that they can really harvest the benefit of therapy. We also know in the case of violence that the risk just goes up and up and up if they're left in the situations that are risky and unsafe. And that's plays itself out over generations. Like it's not just the women who are victims here, their children are as well. And those children are profoundly affected by what they're witnessing. It affects their working model of the world, what they see, like Megan, what feels safe and what feels unsafe, and their ability to become the best version of themselves, which affects all of us, quite honestly. It's everybody's issue.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
We've
Leslie.
gone over our time slightly. But I thank you for coming and sharing that, and Megan for sharing that story with us, because it takes a lot of courage to do that. Thank you. I'm going to invite Natasha Dobler up next. Here representing Nova Vida's Domestic Violence Prevention Services.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Good evening, city councilors, Mayor Davis. My name is Natasha Dobler, and I'm the Executive Director of Nova Vida Domestic Violence Prevention Services, the only emergency shelter for women and children in Brantford and Brant County. I knew this was going. Sorry. Oh, I didn't even get through my first sentence. Last week, some of you city councilors and county councilors and both mayors, along with, thank you, along with our board of directors, staff, community partners, volunteers, and donors. Celebrated Nova Vida's 40th year of providing hope to Brantford and Brant County. 40 years of safe emergency shelter for women and children escaping abuse, violence, and homelessness. 40 years of crisis support and intervention. 40 years of counseling to heal from the impact of violence and abuse. 40 years is a long time. I wanted to use my time today to tell you a story. A few months ago, on a Friday evening, at the end of the day, a shelter worker paged in our building for administration staff to assist the visitor in our reception area, and I was the only one around. We don't have a receptionist because we can't afford one. I can do this. Okay. Those funds have been absorbed by the rising costs of food, insurance, utilities, repairs, and just generally the rising cost of living. At times, we do have volunteers that can help answer the front door, greet guests, respond to their requests, and direct them where to go. But our volunteer program, once thriving with over 60 volunteers, dropped down to less than 20 during the pandemic. We're still trying to rebuild that program. So I, as the executive director, respond to the visitor at the main door because I know the shelter workers are busy upstairs answering crisis calls or consoling someone who's scared or helping a resident fill out their housing forms or developing safety plans or playing with toddlers because mom is overwhelmed or asking a child how her day at school was, or connecting residents to community supports, or explaining how to apply for legal aid or how to find a family law lawyer. The visitor was a young guy barely in his 20s, if that. He had come to pay for his group fees and only had cash. He had just finished our 12-week court-mandated Partner Assault Response Program, PAR, as we call it, a group program for individuals who have used violence in their relationship and have been charged with a domestic violence-related crime. Because at Nova Vita, we also provide counseling and outreach services to men and those who have caused harm in their relationships. So I fumbled around in the reception area looking for a receipt book, and he looked around. And he said to me, "You know, I've been here before." I assumed he meant this was his second time through our PAR program. I made a mental note to mention it to his counselor, that maybe this young guy could benefit from some individual work with our youth services. But my response to him was, "Oh yeah?" And he said, "Yeah, I stayed here with my mom when I was a kid." 40 years is a long time. The children we saw in the shelter back in the day are now adults. Some of these adults have returned to use our services. Some are victims, some are perpetrators. Over the past 40 years, Nova Vita has served over 25,000 citizens of Brantford and Brant County. In 2018, Brantford had the highest rate in Ontario for police-reported cases of intimate partner violence and the fourth highest rate in Canada. Since 2020, femicides in Canada are on the rise. Every 2 days in our country, a woman or girl is killed. 44% of women report having experienced some form of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. In Ontario last year, 52 femicides in 52 weeks. Indigenous women and girls are 3 times more likely to experience violence and 6 times more likely than non-Indigenous women to be murdered as a result of colonization, racism, residential schools, the 60s scoop, and the lasting impacts of intergenerational trauma. Last year, Nova Vita answered 4,594 crisis and support calls on our 24-hour helpline. Last year, 139 women in crisis arrived on our doorstep seeking help. Over the 3 years of the COVID-19 global pandemic, that number was 351. When most social service agencies had to close their doors to the public, we stayed open. Had we not, the results would have been deadly. Last year, Nova Vita provided safe emergency shelter to 68 women and 57 children. But we also had to turn women away 648 times. And this number does not include their children. How is this not an epidemic? Nova Vita has served this community for 40 years. The issue of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence has been and continues to be an epidemic in Brantford and Brant County. We need the leaders in our community to make meaningful investments into solutions that are community-led and community-driven. Today, I'm asking City Council to support Councillor Sicoli's resolution and to declare gender-based violence and intimate partner violence an epidemic in Brantford, to encourage other municipalities and the government of Ontario to do the same, to enact all of the recommendations from the inquest into the triple femicides in Renfrew County and the recommendations of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Girls Calls to Justice, to develop a community action plan to address this epidemic, and to financially support the work of your local gender-based violence crisis and support services who've come forward today and who work tirelessly every day to keep the citizens of this community safe. Thank you for your time, and thank you, Councillor Sokoli, for your leadership.
I don't even know if I can say thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming out. And while I gather myself, I'll invite Joanna Brandt. Joanna's here from the Sexual Assault Center of Brantford. And I'll remind you that we have 6.5 minutes inclusive of questions.
Perfect to follow. My name's Joanna Brandt. I'm the Executive Director of the Sexual Assault Centre of Brant and co-chair of Brant's Response Against Violence Everywhere, or the BRAVE Committee, which we lovingly refer to as the Tri-Wizard Tournament, involving my colleague Natasha and Penny McVicker, who you've already heard from this evening. I'm also the co-chair of the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centres, but I'm representing the staff, volunteers and service users associated with SAC Brant this evening and providing input as a survivor of sexual violence. I've worked at SAC for 30 of my 54 years and have no plans or in fact pension with which to retire. So you might say that being of use to survivors in Brantford and Brant County in the province has become my life's work. SAC is an agency that has been held in care by the local community for over 30 years. SAC staff, volunteers, community-based allies and service users collectively create an equitable and safe place to live and realize our dreams. Together, we work towards creating healing and change. So a lot of what follows is an unapologetic brag for the work that my colleagues and I are engaged in. Survivors of sexual violence are at the center of our work. We are survivors, we work with survivors, we understand our work to be more than assisting one another to recover from the traumatic impacts of sexual violence. We believe that we're responsible for creating change and advocating for systems and individuals to join us. So thank you for your invitation in that direction this evening. We believe that this change will eliminate the circumstances that allow sexual violence to occur, by which we mean gender inequity, racism, colonialism, land violence, poverty, discrimination, and other forms of oppression, and mitigate the harms caused by carceral approaches to justice and mental health. At the practical level, this involves hundreds of hours of direct human contact, even during the pandemic. We provide advocacy and accompaniment to folks on the hardest days of their lives, but they in turn deepen our understanding of our responsibility to one another. Our public education and outreach efforts have pivoted because of remote access considerations. But we've also provided a massive amount of porch visits and phone cards and other specific services such as online chat and text support, parallel to my community partners. So that ensures that we can all continue to build community even as we're recovering from the traumatic impacts of the pandemic and the differential impact on our most marginalized community members. So to be explicit, and thanks to Christine for providing the definitions of intimate partner violence and gender-based violence so eloquently earlier, sexual violence occurs in the context of a trusted relationship, oftentimes even when it appears to be connected to stranger danger. For example, many individuals who are understood to have been trafficked for the purposes of sexual exploitation by justice partners understand themselves to be experiencing difficulty in their relationship with a loved one. Many instances falling under the broad category of IPV fall under those auspices. And sexual violence is also gender-based violence, with most survivors and victims being women, girls, or genderqueer folk, and most people who cause harm being men. So hang on to your hats because I've got some SAC stats for you. So since March of 2020, which we refer to as the before times, until the present day, 3/4 of our crisis line staff have quit, citing adverse changes to personal circumstances, burnout, or traumatic events that they experienced directly in the line of duty. For example, being on the phone when somebody dies, as being their reason for leaving the role. So when the volunteers left, we replaced them with paid workers. When the paid workers left, we realized we had a real crisis. 2/3 of our core staff have left their role, citing similar reasons, in addition to being able to be better compensated and better supported in other jobs outside of the Sexual Assault Centre. I wish this was an overblown metaphor when I tell you that our youth program counsellor found her job at Starbucks that she's now returned to more conducive of her own wellness and enabling of her to provide for her family. We started a waitlist for the first time ever. We've been able to keep up with the requests for services for men and youth, but anyone else can expect a wait in excess of 12 months for your first appointment. With the caveat being that that's unless you have extenuating circumstances. So you can imagine that every day at the office, we're arguing with each other about which client's extenuating circumstances are the most extenuating and whose needs we need to address first, in addition to the burdens placed on us by our regular operations. So at our busiest, we experienced a 600% increase in crisis and support calls over the previous years, which resulted in overhauling the program 4 times in 4 years for a total cost of $3,000. This from an agency, $300,000, I'm sorry. This from an agency whose annual budget is generally less than $500,000. So April 1st marked the beginning of our 5th and most recent overhaul. But 100% of our overnight shifts are being covered by staff who have already worked through the full business day. And we've resorted to a contingency that we've never had to encounter before, where if you call and our worker is with somebody else, you'll be told to call back later. So I wanted to do a shout out for the work behind the scenes that made this opportunity possible, and also to my colleagues from the queer community, Willowbridge, and the co-chairs of the Tri-Wizard tournament, also known as Brave. But also on a more serious and less celebratory note, I'm here repping the people whose day-to-day circumstances prevent them from doing anything other than meeting their own survival needs. Or also for the people who are unable to attend a forum this time because tragedy has already struck and they've been taken from us. So thank you for your consideration in declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic, and I really hope the council finds it in their heart to support that resolution.
Thank you so much, Joanna. And we've exceeded our time, so there's no time left for questions, but I thank you so much for coming out today. And lastly, I will call up Beth McAllister. I feel like a parrot at this point, but 6.5 minutes inclusive of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Beth Stamer McAllister. I use pronouns she, her, and I'm here representing the Sexual Assault Domestic Violence Care Team that's housed at the Brantford General Hospital. We serve Brantford, Brant County, Haldeman County, Norfolk County, Mississaugas of the Credit, and Six Nations as our catchment area. We are a team of nurses and social workers whose sole purpose is to work with victim survivors of gender-based intimate partner and sexual violence, regardless of age. I am honored and proud to be counted among the people who sit behind me. I've only been doing this work for a little over 3 years. I was welcomed and mentored by some of the most amazing representatives in the gender-based violence community, and I am thankful to them. I began my career as a sexual assault nurse examiner in March of 2020. a very opportune time to return to the front lines of nursing. Prior to that, I had spent 16 years in academia and decided that the time was right for me to return to active service. So not only was I battling a pandemic, but I was also battling a shadow pandemic of intimate partner and sexual violence that was occurring. I proudly tell people that I am a sexual assault nurse examiner. It makes very many people uncomfortable when they ask you what you do for a job and that's your response. And most people's response to me is, it's so sad that your job has to exist. And I tell you honestly, yes, it is, but our job is more important than ever, even in the 3 years that I have been enacting this role. I now serve as the clinical leader and program director of the sexual assault and domestic violence care team. I've been in that role for about 2 years because, as my colleagues have mentioned, people burned out, left jobs, and those of us who were just starting in those roles had to take on leadership because that's the way it was. My colleagues have given you all the statistics. I don't need to give you more numbers, but I can tell you that the statistics that they are providing to you are those victim survivors who report to law enforcement. I can tell you that a vast majority of the patients that I see coming through the emergency department choose not to engage in law enforcement because of the stigma that is attached to being a victim survivor of gender-based or intimate partner or sexual violence. A lot of the people that we see know that they will be re-traumatized and re-victimized if they choose to report to law enforcement. So they choose to enact with our agencies, my team, the teams that you see represented behind you. They choose that route for their own healing because they don't feel that they are supported from a law enforcement perspective. We, as a part of the anti-violence community, represented here by just a few of the agencies that do this work, we all try to do our little perfectly within the confines of the budget and the human resources that we have available. I'm going to tell you honestly, we're exhausted. We're exhausted by the work. We're exhausted by writing grant proposals that don't get accepted for all the projects and initiatives that we would love to enact on behalf of the constituents of Brant and Brant County that we just can't do. We have amazing ideas. We just don't have the resources to make that happen. With this declaration, we could leverage the resources afforded by it, not only to provide seamless wraparound services that we all dream of for the victim survivors, but also to emphasize to the constituents of our community that we believe victim survivors. And that is what victim survivors need to hear more than anything else. I ask you to support this resolution and say that you believe survivors. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few questions for you.
Thank you.
Councillor McCreary.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Do you tend to see repeat visits from folks in the ER as well as some of the agencies?
Absolutely, yes. So we service victim survivors not only at their acute time of assault, we provide follow-up services through our program, but we see a lot of victim survivors of intimate partner violence who do not present to the emergency department disclosing that they are victim survivors. They come for many, many other reasons. And through diligent screening and excellent work by my colleagues in the emergency department, we discover that the root problem is actually gender-based and intimate partner violence and try to connect them with these services.
And do you see that the victims of these crimes are victimized by folks who are out on parole and probation quite often, like the folks in Renfrew were?
To tell you the honest truth, a lot of our victim survivors do not disclose the name of their abuser because they're afraid of the repercussions if we were to include that in their medical documentation, which can be subpoenaed in a court of law.
And in your personal opinion, do the perpetrators of these crimes serve enough time in jail?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question from Councillor Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Natasha talked about the cost of living. Joanna talked about poverty as contributing factors. Has the inflation that's causing financial hardship for young families contributed to the increase, in your opinion?
For what the research shows, so my opinion is my opinion, and I believe that's absolutely the social determinants of health are always going to be contributing factors to violence. But when we look at the research, it also backs that up. when
Yeah.
people are under stressful situations, whether they by financial, social, a myriad of other factors. We know that violence is one of the responses, and it's a continuing reason why a team like mine needs to exist.
Which is unfortunate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that concludes the question period for this. Thank you so much. All right, that concludes our list of delegations for this evening, and we do have one presentation. So I will invite Dave Ferguson to come up and begin his presentation on. Dave Ferguson is the manager of traffic services for the city of Brantford. And he has a presentation regarding item 6.1.4, which is the active transportation master plan. And I'll remind you that you have 10 minutes inclusive of questions. No, you get 10 because you're different.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, David Ferguson, Manager of Traffic Services. It is a pleasure to be here this evening to present to you the active transportation master plan that we began working on in 2022, actually. Next slide, please. Let me move myself. There we go. Just some background. So in 2022, council approved a capital budget of $300,000 for this project. We were able to retain Mr. Daryl Bender on a part-time contract, and he had a background in municipal transportation as well as private sector with a focus on active transportation. So overall, we were able to save a considerable amount of money from that budget, as well as we received a grant, I believe around $50,000 that also helped go towards the project itself. In terms of what is active transportation? It is referring to the modes of transportation that focuses on the human power, such as cycling. And we also include transit riders because the beginning and end of their trip results in them walking. So they're part of the active transportation network. Our vision was active transportation is an increasingly important component of urban transportation systems that assist in addressing roadway safety, environmental and climate concerns, equity issues, overall health of residents, and provides an alternative form of transportation beyond traditional means. The big thing we wanted to get across here with respect to defining active transportation was that there was a feeling that there was a misconception that active transportation was just around cycling, but it's really about the human power. So walking, running, getting residents out into the open doors and improving their quality of health. So one of the things we started with was looking at the mass amount of documents that have gone through the city over the years that council has approved. I do have to give credit to city council on the documents and city staff. Some of these documents go back quite a ways, but they all have outlined a need for active transportation and growing the active transportation network within the city of Brantford. The big ones, of course, council priorities that we identified that align with the active transportation master plan. Of course, the transportation master plan, it's very well documented within there about developing a need for active transportation. And then we have the parks and recreation master plan. And the other one was the trail safety audit that we did last year, which was very well received. And then beyond that, we also have the Vision Zero Action Plan, which of course is aligning with the goal to eliminate fatal and serious injury type collisions. Community engagement, there was a big component. We had 2 sessions, one in June, one through July. We used Let's Talk Brantford. We had over 300 responses to the online survey. And then we held 2 public open houses, one here at City Hall and the other one at the Wayne Gretzky Sports Center. In terms of feedback, the biggest areas that were identified for improvement were missing sidewalks. They talked about pedestrian crossings, more designated or separated bike lanes, improved connectivity to the trails and bike racks. We've also done a number of specific consultations with various stakeholders and received their feedback and helped to build that into the overall plan. So in total, we identified 111 locations. Some of these locations are existing locations where we've identified sort of upgrades to these. What's shown on the slide here right now is just the top 20. So this ranking was put together based on usage, based on volumes, collisions, generators, create a ranking system. So what this really does is really helps to assist staff in providing direction in terms of where we want to focus and do work on a yearly basis. So for example, here we've identified Wayne Gretzky Parkway as #1 location. So next year in 2024, our focus would be on Wayne Gretzky Parkway to upgrade that existing multi-use path. Overall, we've identified that the standalone projects, so these are projects that are primarily done within operational services, is about $3.3 million. This would be done with our existing capital budget that we receive every year. And again, this project and this plan is really a 10 to 15 year plan. We'll be looking at opportunities, whether it's through development or engineering services projects, where we can sort of piggyback on those projects to help expand. And of course, that will also help us save some money in terms of being a part of those projects. Overall, the pedestrian network was identified and as being acceptable. There are some areas for improvements that we will continue to work on and work through our existing budgets. So this is just a map of our existing network. The red dashed lines and the dots, these are the top 20 locations that we will be working on over the next little bit. But you can see with the next slide how it really expands and creates that connectivity throughout the entire city, especially providing connectivity to the north, to the south, and then of course those east-west connections. Some of the secondary actions that we identified in this, one of the big ones was education and promotion. We did hear a lot about the need to educate users, both pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, on how to properly interact with each other, whether it's on the trail system or on the sidewalks or multi-use paths. So that's an area we'll be focusing on. We've actually began working on a video that will be 2 parts. One is kind of a economic development tourism type video promoting active transportation in Brantford. And the second one will be a short educational type video. Another one to focus on here is the micromobility and bike share. There is a strong push in municipalities these days about e-bikes and e-scooters. We have been in discussions with a vendor who is working in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. Their product seems quite interesting. So that'll be something we begin exploring and working with the college and the university. Another part I want to just highlight is communications. I know that it's an important part to our municipality. So with this plan, it essentially is giving us direction to proceed with implementing the active transportation network as it's laid out. Each year, we will issue notices to residents of a roadway, as well as the councilors at the beginning of the year, notifying them of the expected project that will be coming up. And we will work with the area residents and counselors if there's any issues around design features such as parking. Obviously, parking can have a big impact. So we will do our best to try and minimize any of those issues that may come up. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. We have 1 minute left and I don't see any questions from the committee. You got off easy. Thank you. All right, committee, that is it for presentations. We will now consider the items that were separated for discussion purposes. So Councillor Sullivan, if you would read the motion to place all separated items for consideration or consent that have not been previously voted on the floor.
Moved by myself, seconded by Council McCurry, that all items for consideration consent 6.1 and 6.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved.
Thank you. And I think I'm going to go off script a little bit here. That should terrify you, but I'm going to move my resolution up if there's no, if nobody's going to contest that here at the committee, just so that we can discuss it, vote on it, and then we'll take just a 5-minute recess and allow people to move on with their life. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I will then ask Mayor Davis to please take the chair and I'll introduce the resolution.
Right, so you're going to be submitting a resolution, first of all, in respect to urgency.
Yes, I'm going to be.
So if you would read your resolution and state who your seconder is.
Okay, so I have to deem it urgent first, right? Is that a separate vote?
Right. Yeah.
So pursuant to, is this what I'm reading here? Perfect. That section, so moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Samwell. That section 15.11.6 of chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived to deem the item urgent in order to be considered outside of the budget process.
All right, so any discussion, realizing that any discussion is limited to the issue of urgency. Seeing no raised hands, I'll call the vote on the urgency resolution.
Thank you. The motion to waive the rules carried on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Celeste, McCrory, Carpenter, Samwell, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Caputo, Sokoli, Mayor Davis, noting Councillor Martin is out of the room at the time of the vote.
Good, so that has passed, which means that the resolution can be dealt with outside of the budget estimates process, and we can deal with it both tonight and at the council meeting later this month. So, Councillor Sokoli, would you please read the resolution in full and confirm your seconder?
Of course, so moved by myself and seconded. Councillor Samwell, will you do the honor? Thank you. Whereas more than 46 municipalities and regions, including the cities of Toronto, Ottawa, Burlington, Windsor, and London, along with Peel, Durham, and Halton regions, Lanark County, and Renfrew County, across Ontario have declared gender-based violence and intimate partner violence an epidemic. And whereas by declaring gender-based violence and intimate partner violence an epidemic, the City of Brantford can join the growing number of municipalities and regions in Canada in demanding action from all levels of government to address this growing epidemic. And whereas the incidences of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence increased exponentially throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and have not decreased, while funding to provide the growing demand of services and support for victims and survivors of intimate partner and gender-based violence has not kept pace. And whereas the City of Brantford had the highest number of police reports for intimate partner violence in Ontario and the fourth highest municipality in Canada in 2018. And whereas Nova Vita answered over 4,500 crisis and support calls in 2022, and in the same year, 648 women who were seeking safe shelter from family violence were turned away because the shelters were full and had no bed space to offer them. This number does not include their children. And whereas in Ontario last year, a woman was killed every week, 52 femicides in 52 weeks. And in Canada, a woman was killed every 2 days. And whereas 30% of women report having experienced a sexual assault since the age of 15. And 44% of women report having experienced some form of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. And whereas gender-based violence impacts individuals, families, and communities, and it also places a costly burden on the health, social, and justice systems. In 2009, it was estimated that intimate partner violence had an economic cost of $7.4 billion annually, and sexual violence had a cost of $4.8 billion annually. And whereas the crisis hotlines are up 600% from previous years, and the funding and the volunteerism is at an all-time low. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Brantford declare gender-based violence and intimate partner violence an epidemic in the City of Brantford, and that the City of Brantford Council recommend that gender-based violence and intimate partner violence be declared an epidemic in the province of Ontario, and that the City of Brantford Council requests that femicide be added as a term to the Criminal Code of Canada and state its position to the Honorable Arif Virani, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, and the Prime Minister of Canada. And that the City of Brantford request that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the FCM, and the AMO, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and all municipalities and regions in Ontario declare gender-based and intimate partner violence an epidemic across the country. And that the City of Brantford requests that the provincial and federal governments rightly declare intimate partner and gender-based violence an epidemic and enact the additional 85 recommendations from the inquest into the 2015 murders of Carol Colton, Anastasia Kuzik, and Nathalie Warmerdam in Renfrew County, Ontario, which provide a roadmap to preventing intimate partner violence from escalating to femicide. And that the City of Brantford requests that the provincial and federal governments provide the necessary support to municipalities, regions, and their emergency and social services to meaningfully address the gender-based violence and intimate partner violence epidemic. And that staff be directed to consult with community organizations in the development of a community intimate partner violent action plan to be provided to City Council prior to March 31st, 2024. And that plan is to include input from community organizations regarding needed resources to address the local IPV epidemic, community-wide awareness campaign to highlight local IPV impacts and the available supports, evidence-based approaches to engage and support youth who are at risk of experiencing or committing intimate partner violence, and opportunities for Brantford City Council to support and advocate for community organizations that are addressing this epidemic. I guess it's my turn to speak.
Yes, it is.
And I wrote a lot of stuff and I don't know how much I'll get through, but bear with me. And there's many times when I'm proud for Brantford to categorically be number one at something. And you know, this is not one of those times. In Ontario, 52 women lost their lives, murdered in 52 weeks for no reason other than they were a woman. Let that sink in. Let that sink in for a second. Our recorded cases of IPV in Brantford have been steadily increasing from 575 calls in 2021 to 591. And I'm saddened to say that we are on track to exceed that this year. And Penny graciously supplied these stats for me that we're already at 315 calls in 6 months. These statistics should terrify us, and they're made worse to hear that Nova Vita, our local service and our community, relies on them to provide emergency services and shelter to women and children escaping a dangerous situation. They had to deny shelter 648 times. 648 families were denied, not people, families with multiple children. And where did they go? I'll let you guess where they went. Back to their assailants. Where did they go? To the streets? We can do better, Brantford. We can work with our community partners to enhance our systems. We can work with our youth to teach them right from wrong in this respect. And we can teach them what to do and where to go when wrong happens. We can teach the young and the old that intimate partner violence is so much more than physical harm. 44% of women have experienced intimate partner violence. And it's gaslighting. It's forcing your partner to wear certain things or withholding finances to keep them handcuffed at home with nowhere to go. It's emotional abuse, it's verbal abuse, it's sexual harassment. Who hasn't been touched inappropriately as a woman from one time at one point in your life? Just last week, who hasn't? It needs to stop, and we can do better, and we'll do better together. And that's what this resolution does. It brings us together as a community to figure out how we improve. And it allows us to join 46 other municipalities and numerous other associations in the fight to do better and put an end to femicide and hate crime and harassment and abuse. And the list goes on. And I thank you all for coming out today and sharing your stories. It takes a lot of courage to come out and share that. And I know many times I haven't had that courage to do that. So thank you. And I hope that I have the support of this council tonight to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coley. I'll now go to Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for being here this evening. Hard to hear, hard to listen to. I always taught my children for their profession and so forth, is do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I don't know how you do what you do every day. Councillor Sicoli, I applaud you for bringing this forward today, bringing forth our opportunities as a city to do better, to be there for everybody. I think we need to do better as a city. We need to do better as a province. We need to do better as a country. We cannot keep having individuals be incarcerated and be let out the same day. We need to look at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program that would help and assist in this. I will support this tonight because I feel it's the most important thing that we'll be talking about in the next little while. Thank you for being here, and best wishes as you move forward every day.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. And I too applaud my ward mate, Councillor Sicoli, for bringing this forward. I thank all of you for coming and sharing your stories as well. It's really hard to swallow this and just understand how bad that things have actually gotten. The ugliness that COVID is really showing through to everybody. There's no place for violence. There's no place for people not being able to get medical treatment and therapy when required. Nobody should have to walk through the streets of our city afraid at any given time. These things need to change, and I think all of us standing together right now will make that first step for the city. Thank you.
Councillor Samuel.
Thank you. So first, I want to say that I, as well as almost everybody here, I'm sure would say that they've known people that have had their lives touched by intimate partner violence. And I think that it's so important that we declare this tonight. I really just want to commend Councillor Sicoli for bringing this forward, and I'm honored to have had the opportunity to second this. I just want to get to the point where we can do the good work that we need to do as a council to make sure that the agencies that are doing this work in our community don't ever have to turn anybody away again. Thank you.
Next, Councillor Sluss.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to thank you ladies for coming forward this evening. It was obviously very emotional for a number of you and for good reason. It's a tough row you hoe every day, and we thank you for the work that you do. I'd also like to thank Councillor Sicoli. It takes intestinal fortitude to bring something like this forward. It's a subject that people don't really want to talk about and yet have to talk about. And it's awkward and it's uncomfortable, and it's things that have to be said out loud instead of just thought. So probably for me, the scariest thing that I've heard this evening is this is probably the tip of the iceberg. What we're hearing tonight is what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. And I think that's the part that scares me. It's easy to just kind of hope life is just good and everybody's happy and everything's good. But like I said earlier, the ugly truth, I think, has to come out and is coming out this evening. So I commend again Councillor Sicoli for doing what she did this evening, and I'm very, very pleased and certainly very supportive. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you for the work you do every day. I'm very concerned about you. I heard today quivering, shaking in your voices, stress, pain, because you're experiencing pain through others, from what others are experiencing. And then you have to go sort of cap in hand to provincial and federal governments and governments for money. You got to write grant proposals to see if you can get this little program started. You haven't had funding increases in some, I think I heard someone say 20 years. How can this be that we would let this fall apart in our country, in this province, that the funding would disappear? I know welfare rates haven't been increased since 2018. The poor have been under attack for some time. You've been holding the threads together, barely. Well, you're not even doing that, but you're doing as best you can. I just want to I grew up with a single mother, 10 brothers and sisters. I was kept whole because my mother made sure of that. And that's why she was a single mother. My wife had an alcoholic father, and her mother made sure that she was kept safe, and that was changed as well. That isn't always the case out there. Like you say, some people have no choice, or they go back, or they don't know that they have a choice. It's really sad to see how far we've fallen behind by just us not paying attention at this level even. You know, I know some with, working with some of you, I know what's going on in those agencies, but not collectively. Collectively, when we see what's going on in this community. And I can't help, I said to my wife the other day, 45 years for us next week, that it seems like the world is upside down. Ever since the Donald Trump released bigotry and ignorance and hatred, it seemed to be that was okay. See, and we see more and more of it. We see people protesting hatred in the street just the other day. And I just don't understand it. I don't understand, where is this anger and hatred coming from that's boiling over? And why is it that governments, federal and provincial and municipal, can't reach out and make sure that the supports are there to support what you do, to support what people need to do? It's not happening. I don't think, quite frankly, we can just look at this resolution and say to the provincial and federal government, need to do more. I think we're gonna have to do it. It always ends up with us anyways. Provinces always just sort of hand the money down sometimes. And then they withdraw it later. Of course, you all used to that. You know what that looks like. And so I really can't depend, I won't depend on any provincial or federal government again. I think we have to put the program in place ourselves. We have to provide sustainable funding at this level. And then we need to clamor to the provinces to give us the money. Right now, they're pulling money from us to give to the rich developer friends. And we need more money than ever to support what's going on in the communities. So I think we've got to do it ourselves. So again, Rose, thank you for your resolution. I do appreciate it very much, deeply. Because I know when you say everybody knows someone that's been touched by violence, gender violence, we certainly do. And we can all tell stories about it. And we think that, okay, that's over now. But we just sort of forget that it's ongoing. It's happening to other families and to other people, and the abuse is there. So
Councilor Carpenter,
thank you for everything that you've been doing, you continue to do. And I really worry about your burnout. Anything we can do to help you now, we need to do now. Thank you.
Next, I have Councilor McCreary, then Van Tilburg, and Councilor Hunt.
Chair, thank you, and thank you to all involved for having this before us today. I know there's been some debate. The province hasn't completely adopted all of the recommendations and probably won't. And perhaps what we do today can have a bit of an impact on this, but I don't want to let people forget exactly why we're here. We're here because in September 2015, some rat murdered 3 women. And I won't dignify him by speaking his name today, but the 3 women were mentioned in the resolution, but I think it's important to recognize that these were living human beings. Carol Culleton, Anastasia Kuzik, and Natalie Warmerdam, brutally murdered in Renfrew 2015 by a guy that had threatened and harmed them previously, who had assaulted a cop who was out on probation. Probation folks didn't give the supports needed to the previous victims, and he was free to murder them. And it's only by the grace of God that the kid of one of the victims got out without being shotgunned himself. So let's not forget why we're here, to honor those 3 people. Not strange that it took 5 or 6 or 7 years to have an inquest. I think it might be. It's been now more than a year since the recommendations were made, and one of the recommendations, in fact, was for the folks to get together after a year and review it, because I think they had some presage that likely a lot of the recommendations would not get acted on. So there are 86 of them. 68 were addressed to the province of Ontario, 5 to the chief firearms officer, because of course the guy had a gun. That's how he murdered. 4 to the chief coroner, 5 to the feds. 1, the other one, of course, was to review it in a year. And everybody failed these 3 women. There's no accountability. The guy was sentenced to 70 years in prison. Supreme Court overturned it. He could be out in as little as 10 or 15 years because, of course, the people that hear probation and parole recommendations weren't there sitting on the jury. They never saw the bodies. They never participated in the horror. They simply are appointees that look at pieces of paper and make decisions that affect other people's lives. So you get 3 dead women and 3 families that grieve them, and will never get over this because of systemic problems in the province of Ontario and Canada, the country. And people have hit upon the lack of funding. Well, the government that we've got in power now just cut $1 billion to the military, although they seem to enjoy spending large amounts overseas on things that Canadians really don't care about. So we've got a lot to do here. As Councillor Carpenter said, most of this stuff ends up in our lap. The problems that other governments create, problems that they fail to address, we have to look after. And we have, of course, limited abilities, but I think you'll probably come away tonight realizing that we will do what we can do. We will advocate, and we'll try to endow and lobby for greater funding for you folks, not for you folks, but to prevent recurrences of what happened to Culleton, Kuzik, and Warmerdam in 2015. Thank you, Chair.
Councilor Van Tilburg.
Can only be taken aback by the stories that I've heard tonight. And there's something that I know, that you people are the best people to be handling these situations. You take a threadbare budget and you make it last and you try to help every single person. And I can see now when you're talking about burnout and volunteers not being able to continue. Your thread shoestring budget is now in threads in order to deal with what's before us. So I'm really hoping that we can do something that can affect that change. The other thing that I think really caught my attention, and it's contingent upon other things that happen in our community, is that it's been brought to me on how people who do these assaults are almost immediately back on the streets. And how can you feel safe? I thought, and perhaps I'm wrong, I had thought there was a time where if you had created a domestic assault that you were actually held on bail for a period of time. But clearly that isn't happening now. And that needs to happen. If there's been an assault and someone's committed something, and it takes all the courage in the world to contact the police or make it happen, because these are people that you know, and they can get back at you. Certainly some cooling down holding period is required. And when you hear that that's not happening, that I find that disgraceful. I find that dangerous. I find that deadly. And I think that it's those kinds of actions that allow a person to get to that level where they feel invincible and they can go and murder people because they haven't been held accountable and responsible in the past, that they've been able to get away with it this long. So again, I thank you all. I thank Councillor Sicoli for bringing this forward, and that I believe this is going to get legs and grow, and everyone in this council wants to do their best to help you.
Councillor Hunt.
Yes. So first of all, I want to thank each and every one of the delegates that came forward to bring forth the stories of your agencies. However, I think the underlying story and the other thing that I think you really need to be acknowledged for is what I would call an epidemic of chronic underfunding in the services that you are providing. And this is chronic underfunding that also goes across many of our human services sector, including the healthcare sector, which is chronically underfunded. So what we're seeing as a result of that chronic underfunding is a failure of whether it be the federal government, the provincial government, or our municipal government. It's a failure to provide services to our constituents, to our residents, and it's a failure to help the people that need those services. And that chronic underfunding is leaving all of you in a position where you are burned out, you don't have any staff, and you don't have capacity to provide services at the level that the demand requires. And for that alone, I think that this is an atrocious failure of all levels of government to just support people in our community. I also want to thank you for, especially to thank Leslie from Willowbridge for bringing forward the story that women with disabilities. I can tell you, I spent a number of years as an executive director of a national health charity, and our support services for persons with disabilities were primarily for women. Women with a disability are twice as likely to be victims of intimate partner violence than the rest of the regular population. And that is, as a person with a disability, a staggering statistic for anyone to realize, given the fact that 22% of the population identifies as having a disability. And that percentage over the age of 65 is 40%. So these are multi-generational issues that are affecting women of all ages, from young women all the way up to the seniors that are living in our community. So again, thank you. I obviously will be supporting the resolution. And again, I think the other message that we really need to get across here is that we need sufficient funding for the vital services that are being delivered in our community. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words. I can come at this with both a historical and professional perspective. I did practice law from 1981 until 2018, and about half my practice was family law. And I can remember back in the early 80s when I first started practicing, having many women come to me who were in this situation and feeling in many ways somewhat helpless, in the sense that at that time we had a system, both judicial and outside of that, that didn't really take it as seriously as it should. And over the course of the 1980s into the 1990s, it changed. I can recall the formative days of Nova Vita and how that began a process of change in our community, was taken much more seriously, was an important priority. There was funding. And I think it began to change the arc in terms of the incidence of intimate partner violence. And so very discouraging to realize now in the last 4 years, and I think we've seen it in other data, partly related to the pandemic, I think partly related to there being, so many other priorities that governments have, that we're seeing once again a growth in intimate partner violence, which frankly is just totally unacceptable. And so this resolution, I think, is a clarion call, and it's gone out in many other municipalities, that unfortunately, once again, this is an important priority and has to be made a more pressing priority for both ourselves and other levels of government than it has, say, over the last 10 to 12 years. And I'm sure this resolution and many others similar to it across the province will have a cumulative impact in helping to change the way in which the upper levels of government set their priorities, and so more resource will be devoted to this. I think there's also something that we personally can do in our own lives. And, we all see examples in our daily lives where someone is not treating their partner in a way that is less than desirable, and speaking out against that and pointing it out to them. And there's ways to do that, because sometimes this begins with kind of a tolerance that might be in a family unit or between friends. And it can be one person pointing it out that that's unacceptable, and there are other ways to deal with this and deal with your anger. And so that it becomes, so that there is pressure amongst family members and friends for someone who is behaving inappropriately, for them to try and help them change their course. And that's why I was so excited, 2 decades ago when Nova Vita included the PAR program, which I thought was very valuable and helpful. And I'm glad it still continues, but obviously needs more funding. And the other thing that this resolution, I think, reminds us, it's not just the intimate partner violence, which unfortunately we have a long history of, and many of us understand or are familiar with it, but the gender-based violence, especially over the last year or two, with the pandemic, with certain social issues that have arisen. We've seen recent examples, and that's creating a certain intolerance towards people, other members of our society who identify maybe perhaps differently than others. And I think that certainly this resolution is important to remind us that that is a growing area of just unacceptable violence, and something that we have to consider in terms of the funding and the allocation of funds and the priorities. And in fact, I've heard many of the stories over the last 2 to 3 years when you attend the various events that happen on an annual basis, and you hear the personal stories that people will tell of gender-based violence, which, in some ways is very frightening because it's so unpredictable, and can come at someone right out of the blue, just because of the lifestyle and a lifestyle choice they have, and makes it even more alarming and difficult to deal with. So I'm quite happy to support this. I'm hoping it'll have a positive impact for us as a council with the benefit of some of our great staff, social services staff will look closely at what it is we can do to help, acting as a lobbying and advocating the other levels of government. And also, there's also other small things we can do. For example, the Mayor's Gala this year, which will be in February. The beneficiary of the proceeds, charitable proceeds, will be Nova Vita, because I know that they've been pressed and wanted to expand some of their programming. And so we're hoping we can raise at least 70,000 and perhaps as much as 100,000 to help Nova Vita in some of its own budgetary shortfalls and perhaps expand some of its own programming. And I'm very happy to do that. And I know the team is very excited that we have Nova Vita as the beneficiary for this year's gala. So happy to support this. And thank you, Councillor Sicoli and Councillor Samuel for seconding it, for bringing it forward. Any other discussion? Saying none? Oh, Councillor Carpenter for second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Who in staff is going to be heading this up?
I think it's Aaron Wallace.
It's Aaron, the staff, okay. Because I really don't want to miss the point that talks about input from the community organization regarding needed resources to address the local IPV epidemic and all the epidemic of violence, right? Quite frankly, I really want to find out clearly, as my ward mate said, the chronic underfunding, where it's at, and what would it take to have sustainable funding that was kept pace with inflation as well. So I'm hoping that I'm saying this to staff. I want to make sure that's in the report. What is our situation like with our organizations trying to do good work and the funding not being there? What would it take for proper sustainable funding, not this right grant proposal to try and keep your head above water funding, but sustainable funding? I'd like to make sure that we don't miss that coming forward in the report. And if it comes sooner than 2024, be happy to lobby the government before that, or if there's an opportunity for us to do something in our own budgets this coming year in January. I'd like to know if any information is available by then. I just think I think we're in a crisis situation with funding, and listening to these good people, I just couldn't help. They're at the breaking point. I could hear it, and it's just not right that they are doing such good work under such stress. We should be doing better. Thank you.
Councillor Scully, I guess, no?
Yeah, I'm just going to wrap
No,
up.
hang on, we have Councillor McCreary who wants to speak a second time.
Okay.
Chair, thank you very much. Just like to suggest that we amend this by sending a copy to the MP and the MPP for Brant and to the Brant County Health Unit.
It's friendly.
Not seeing anybody else with raised hands for the second time. So Councillor Scully, why don't you wrap it up for us?
Thank you. And I just want to make sure that we have the narrative right before we wrap this up, because I've heard a lot of words being tossed around like drug use and alcohol and bail reform and poverty. And I just want to make it absolutely clear that women do drugs too, and women drink too, and we aren't out pillaging and raping and murdering. Okay, so we need to correct our own narrative in our own heads, that these are not excuses. Okay, and we need to stop making excuses for gender-based or intimate partner violence. And using drugs is not an excuse. Being drunk was not an excuse to rape someone. And until we start changing this narrative in our own minds, we're not going to get anywhere. So I just want to make that abundantly clear before we wrap up, that that's something we should be paying attention to. And the resolution is worded strategically because I've had a lot of discussion with Aaron Wallace, and he's very excited to take this on. And we didn't want to sit down and dictate to our community partners what they needed. We wanted them to have the opportunity to come together and come to us and tell us what they need, and then we can work together to figure out how we get that. So you'll find that it's a little bit vague, the resolution, and that's on purpose. It's because I didn't want to just pick and choose what the community needed. I wanted them to come to us and say, we need this and it's going to cost this. And then we can figure out what we want to do. And I'm hoping that that will be detailed in the report that will come back to us in March of 2024. And again, I thank everyone for their support, and I thank everybody who came out here tonight. Thanks, guys.
Madam Deputy Clerk, would you please take the vote?
Thank you. Item 7.1, gender-based and intimate partner violence, carried unanimously. All those councillors voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Sless, McCreary, Carpenter, Samwell, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin. Sorry, it just disappeared on my screen. So it carried unanimously.
Councillor Secoli, I'll hand the chairing duties back to you.
Thank you. And before we continue into items for consideration, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess for us to just grab some refreshments and allow the members of chamber to exit. Okay. All right, committee, we're going to continue. And just so everyone's on the same page, we're going to move to our regularly scheduled items, which is the items for consideration. And we're on item 6.1.4, the Vision Zero Road Safety Committee report. And it's item number 1 within the report, which is the Active Transportation Master Plan. Okay, do we have any discussion on the Active Transportation Master Plan? Counselor Carpenter.
Just one for the viewing public. As you heard in the presentation, that the community will be consulted at each step of the process. When something's happening in your neighborhood, you will be consulted, your ward councilor will be consulted, and you'll know about it in advance. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Seeing no additional requests for comment, Madam Clerk, can you take the vote, please? Yeah.
Thank you. Item 1 of the Vision Zero Road Safety Committee report carried on a recorded vote of 10-0. All those voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Celeste, McCreary, Carpenter, Samwell, Van Tilburg, Martin, Caputo, Secoli, and Mayor Davis, noting that Councillor Hunt was out of the room at the time of the vote.
Thank you. Next item is the same report, which is the Vision Zero report, but we're looking at item 3, which is the Shellard Neighborhood Traffic Review. And I asked for this to be separated. Mayor Davis, do you want to take the chair?
Sure. All right, so we're dealing with, is it C? It's the third one, right? So I assume you want to speak to it, Councilor Secoli.
Why, yes, I do. Thank you. I just wanted to draw attention to this and for the viewing public and for members of this committee that they know that this is a result of 2 public meetings, and this started last term with Councillor Vanderstelt and continued. There was a second public meeting this year with Councillor Sullivan, and we worked really hard with the neighborhood associations and with the traffic services here at the City of Brantford, came up with this wonderful plan for the Shellard Lane area, and it's much needed. The community is banging down our door for it. We're going to see a few more speed cushions and raised pedestrian crosswalks coming in to the Shellard Lane area, which is Winfield, the original Winfield area, if you're wondering, as well as the McGinnis and St. Patrick neighborhood. You'll notice that there's a large part of this neighborhood missing, and that is the Winfield West neighborhood, which is the newer side where they're still actively building. And I just want the residents of that neighborhood to know that you have not been forgotten. It's just that those lands are unassumed, which means we as a city, we don't have the capacity just yet to go in and start altering the roadways and making changes of a physical nature to the roadways. So we will be holding another public meeting once we have assumed a majority of those lands to address all of those issues in the same way that we did here. We did focus on schools and trails and making sure that children who are like crossing to get to parks and pedestrians crossing to access trail access points, that was a priority to us. So we will see some raised pedestrian crosswalks, which are those very large speed cushions, basically at every single school in the neighborhood. And I plan on continuing that moving forward so long as I'm here to do so. So thank you again to everybody. I'm hoping that I have support from this council to move this forward. And thank you to my ward mate for working with me on this, and to traffic management staff. Thank you.
Councilor McCreary.
Chair Mayor, thank you. Thank you very much. Through you to staff. With respect to the Shellard neighborhood traffic calming plan, is it staff's intention to use the same type of humps, bumps, cushions that we used on Foresight?
Through the chair, yes, we have a standard that we utilize. So it would be the same design.
So staff and counselors have received some concerns about those. Will that be taken into account before we install the ones in the West Brant neighborhoods?
Through the chair, yes, so we'll also be reviewing Forsyth to make sure they actually are to our spec.
Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I also wanted just to speak to this because a lot of time and effort has gone into this traffic calming situation for the Shellard Lane area. It was the #1 concern for most people. Rest assured, the plan is not going to deviate any of the arterial roads. This is just to slow down the traffic going through the residential neighborhoods. So everybody is safer, including your children. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this. We just did this in the Terrace Hill neighborhood as well. And a lot of the same issues come up at various locations. Just a question through the staff. They're talking about doing the raised crosswalks in the vicinity of every school. Is that something that we can incorporate in our planning going forward so that the developer builds that in when the area is developed initially?
Through the chair, yeah, that's something we can bring forward to obviously the planning group and notify them that when there is a school, and of course, based on type of roadway, et cetera,
Yeah.
that can be incorporated.
Where appropriate.
That's correct.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter.
Yeah, I'm in support of the good work that the Ward 1 councils have done here and with staff and Shelters Lane. I know at the committee, some thought it was rather expensive, and it is expensive, but it's a large area. That part of Shelters Lane is ginormous. It is a large area. And I really appreciate the idea of having raised crosswalks at all the schools, because we're doing that experiment on Brentwood Park Road. And I really liked the idea when I saw it. And I really liked the idea in front of all the schools. And we were looking at speed bumps when they're only maybe 20 or 30 feet from where the raised crosswalk would be, the raised crosswalk. I'll go for that every time. So I really think there's some really unique ideas happening here that can be applied to other parts of the city as well. So thank you to staff for being so open-minded and forthright. Thank you. And to the people, it's got to pass the budget process. So you better, so if you live in Shelters Lane, you want to support this traffic review and all in it, and I hope you do, then you need to make sure you speak to all the counselors when it comes to budget time. Thank you.
Councillor Sloss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank staff. This is a large comprehensive report, and they took the time to meet. I'm sure they met with all the ward councilors to present the plan too, and that we had that kind of intimate setting to talk about specific things that affected our wards. And I think that made this evening go a lot easier because it wasn't one gigantic piece of information. It was stuff that we had already been circulated, had a presentation of individually as wards, and it just makes the whole process work a lot better and it's more understandable, at least for this counselor, and I'm sure for others, that it made the whole process work good. And I just thank you for taking that extra step and having the individual meetings by ward. That was really good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that because I've seen it. I haven't seen it in every ward, but I've been involved in several of these in different wards. And this is due in large part to ward councilors advocating and lobbying for this, but also some staff. And in particular, I want to thank Dave for the work that he's done and those that are working with him, and of course, managers and directors. But it's really been stellar, the work that's been done. It's like a systemically going through the city. A lot of time and effort taken up with neighborhood meetings and working with the ward councilors and coming up with some good ideas, and then going back to the community, having another public meeting. And it's been a process I think that we're seeing has been very effective. I know in my own neighborhood off of Glenwood, we saw it happen through working with Councillor Antosky and Councillor Carpenter. And it's really made an impact in that neighborhood to the plus. I want to thank staff for that. And I also want to thank staff for the whole active transportation initiative. Certainly last summer, I was using a e-scooter quite a bit throughout the city. And you feel so much safer and you're much more inclined to use active transportation when you know the street that you're going to be on does have either a separated lane or at least a very, very distinct lane markings. Other areas of the city where there's high traffic, no lane markings, the truncated nature of our bike network, it makes it really hard to use your bike for more than just recreation. And although we have a great set of recreational trails, we do have a system for non-recreation riding that is broken up and does need to be on a much more organized basis. And I think the end result of that will be more people will use a bike to go shopping, go to work. And I like to remember the words of the Gretzky family. I can't remember, was Walter had said it or Wayne? Like you go to where the puck is going to be, not where it is now. And when you look at how society's changing, especially generations younger than my own peer group, the use of bicycle and active transportation is much more important to them because of, in terms of their monetary constraints and whatnot, and what it is they want in their life. And you can see it happening all across Canada and other areas of the world with e-bikes. So we're a little bit behind the curve, and it's kind of the chicken and the egg. We're not using the paths we have, the bike lanes we have. Well, that could be in part because it's incomplete, and it's like the chicken and the egg. If you have a great bike lane system, then people will use it. And I think we're seeing that other parts of the world, and especially with e-bikes. In fact, we're even seeing e-bikes now. They're designed, people to take on, their children and go shopping in big carrier baskets. And, I even saw it in a city that one of my daughters lives in, Whitehorse, Yukon, a little bit colder than Brantford in the winter. And because they have a great bike trail system, there is quite a number of people who live in that community that use it to commute in the winter because it's a great bike trail system. It's designed to move people in and out of their downtown for work-related purposes, and it's cleared in the winter. And people will use it if they feel safe and they're maintained through the winter. So I'm happy to support this particular subset, and also happy to have supported the main motion. So with that, I'll call the vote on, Councillor Hunt. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. And through you to staff, again, thank you for the initiative on the active transportation master plan and the work that's being done. I specifically want to speak to it from the standpoint of probably 12 or 13 years ago. At the time, I was the chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee for the City of Brantford, and we brought forth a motion to ask council for funding to educate persons that were using mobility devices and how they interacted with vehicular transportation. And for anybody that's seen somebody driving either a scooter or a power wheelchair down the middle of West Street, for example, and trying to turn left into the Zehrs parking lot, that's just an accident waiting to happen. So the more bike lanes that we have, the safer it is for persons using mobility devices to be able to navigate. So it's not just, and I think it was called human powered was the word. So certainly wheelchairs and mobility scooters also benefit from having bike lanes in place throughout the city, because it's a much safer and in a lot of cases a much smoother ride than riding on some of our sidewalks. But that's not something to be forgotten in terms of human powered, is the fact that we have persons with disabilities that are, can't walk on a sidewalk and do use the bike lanes as an example. So thank you.
All right, so I'll call the vote, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you. Item 3, a Vision Zero Road Safety Committee report carried unanimously. All those voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Celeste McCreary, Carpenter, Samwell, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Secolia, Mayor Davis.
So I'll turn the chair back to you, Councillor Scully.
Thank you, Mayor Davis, for basically chairing half this meeting for me. So that concludes all of our items for consideration and consent items. We do have one resolution, as item 7.1 was already dealt with earlier in the meeting. Councillor Van Tilburg, would you please move your resolution and state your seconder? And are you going to be asking us to consider this as urgent?
As urgent and to be waived, yes.
Okay, so I'll have you read the motion to deem this to be urgent.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Samwell, that section 15.11.6 of the chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived to deem the item urgent in order to be considered outside of the budget process. And quite simply, it's not really going to be a part of the budget process, which is why I'd just like to move it on and let it go forward.
And just a reminder to this committee that this does require a 2/3 vote. Any discussion on the motion to waive the rules? I have Councillor Martin.
Yeah, just a question through the staff. Why do we even need this if there's no budgetary impact from this resolution? Why do we have to do it this way?
Through the chair, I can try to answer that. So staff we're actually using the estimates committee as a tool for staff resources to be allocated. It's not only directly related when it's financial impacts, we're also using it as planning moving forward for staff resources, financial implications and everything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Seeing no further speakers, we'll call the vote on the motion to waive the rules.
Thank you. The motion to waive the rules carried unanimously. All those councillors voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Celeste McCreary, Carpenter, Samwell, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Secolia, Mayor Davis.
Thank you. And now that we've waived the rules, Councillor Van Tilburg, if you would bring forward your motion and state your seconder, reading the entire motion, please.
Thank you, Chair Secolia, and through you, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Samwell. Review of mandatory treatment programs, correction facilities, and legislation. Whereas addressing the incidence and impact of homelessness is a priority of Brantford City Council. And whereas the city is taking a number of steps to enhance programs to support homeless individuals, including warming and cooling centers, increased encampment response, access to washrooms and hygiene stations, healthcare partnerships, and homeless shelter services. And whereas local organizations continue to develop innovative and collaborative solutions to support individuals and families. And whereas the causes of homelessness can be complex and unique, and with one of the primary causes being undiagnosed and untreated mental health and addiction issues. And whereas homelessness shelters cannot provide the level of care needed by individuals experiencing acute or chronic mental health and addiction challenges. And whereas individuals experiencing untreated and undiagnosed acute and chronic mental health or addiction challenges are at higher risks to themselves and to other members of the community. And whereas every individual deserves the opportunity for treatment and recovery. And whereas mandatory treatment options can be effective for individuals experiencing cognitive challenges that are a barrier to self-initiated treatment. And whereas over the past 20 years, changes to legislations has restricted the use of mandatory treatment, even when requested by healthcare professionals, police, court officials, or family members. And whereas the past practice within mandatory treatment centers were identified as harmful to individuals, new advances in the understanding and treatment and root cause of mental health and addiction represents an opportunity to review the current treatment options. And whereas institutions like the former Birch Institution provided greater deterrence and accountability for minor offenses, the nature of which are or have been on the rise in Brantford for some time. Now, therefore, be it it's resolved that the Brantford City Council requests that the Ministry of the Attorney General, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Long-Term Care, a review of the Mental Health Act 1990 and the Health Care Consent Act to determine options for effective and compassionate mandatory treatment for individuals who cannot receive proper care through non-mandatory treatment regimes, and that this review include a comprehensive and consultation with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and that that Brantford City Council requests that the Ministry of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions, and Intergovernmental Relations create an institution similar to the former Birch Institution in the Brantford area to provide necessary deterrence and accountability for crime in the community, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Honorable Doug Downey, Attorney General, and the Honorable Stan Cho, Minister of Long-Term Care, the Honorable Sylvia Jones, Minister of Health, and the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care, the Honorable Dominic LeBlanc, Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernment Relations, AMO, and the OBCM. And that's a lot of words there. But what it really means is that we are seeing another epidemic in our community. And that is where addictions and mental health are leading people onto our streets more and more. And there are really not the resources needed to care for them and get them the help that they need. I can't understand how one might think that allowing people who are driven by their addiction to choose the life on the street and wither away before our eyes is good for the community, good for them, and good for anybody. The last number of years have been really painful. And I think we all see it. I think the community sees what's happening in our society and neighborhoods. And people that are in need of help and they ask, the resources aren't there. It's a referral that goes to nowhere, or the timelines are too long. And so if you have that moment of clarity of mind, we have to catch it then. We have to know that when they're ready, we're ready, and we're not. And each week, I see more and more of how not ready we are and how much more needs to be done. It gets harder for those who watch what we refer to as homelessness on the streets, but it's heavily driven by addiction. And their compassion for people hardens when they see that the addiction is what's putting them on the street. That is the stigma. And that stigma is that people would like to have them helped, but what they're seeing happen is that to feed their addictions, it requires money. And it requires a lot of resources for our police force when the acquiring of the money is rifling through neighborhoods, rifling through people's private property, stealing catalytic converters, doing what they need in order to feed their addictions. And what I've had to tell people, and it's rather strange when you're the lowest guy in the series of elected government officials and you're part-timer, how come things aren't happening? How come people aren't being held accountable for their actions? Well, one accountability is, yes, they have mental health and addiction issues. The other is we have nowhere to really treat them, nowhere to pull them out of the environment. If we send them to local response and they come back out, they're right back in the environment that they may wish to escape from. And so it's a revolving circle. People wonder, why do our police forces do nothing? Why aren't they out there trying to deal with this? You're chronically being having things stolen over and over again from your property, and nothing seems to be happening. Well, I think we all seen, we don't have a local jail. We don't have anything that is really there for handling minor criminal offenses. And therefore, this cycle remains on the streets and in our neighborhoods. Apparently, I'll have to wrap this up now. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm gonna be interested to hear what other counselors have to say regarding this. But that's what's been happening in our neighborhoods, and people really would like to see a change where we can have help for those that need the help and have them somewhere to go. And not only will we make a better community, we'll save some lives.
Thank you so much. We do have a few speakers in the queue, beginning with Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And thank you to Councillor Van Tilburg for bringing this forward. This is something that's logical and makes a lot of sense, which means the other levels of government probably won't act on it, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate because it is a great idea. It's one that needs to happen. One of the problems we have with Brantford is when we lost our local jail, we started sending all our criminals to Milton, where they were networking and hooking up with the Toronto criminals and learning from them and bringing that crime back to Brantford, which is very unfortunate. And I think the best use of this facility, if it does come to fruition, will be the court system. Anything we can do to put a kink in the whole catch and release system and make some accountability for people's actions, I think is going to be a very good positive thing. And the biggest problem I see is my first comment is that the other levels of government won't act on this, even though it is a great idea, one that never should have gone away in the first place. We never should have got rid of Birch, but unfortunately we did. And if we can resurrect something similar, that'll be wonderful. And I fully support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, you're up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're doing a great job. I too wanted to applaud Councillor Van Tilburg for bringing this forward. It is a long time coming. One thing I would hope could be considered friendly is if we could add our MPP to this as a copy. Other than that, that's it.
Is that friendly?
Adding the MP and MPP is definitely friendly.
That's friendly. Thank you. Up next, Councillor Samwell.
So I just wanted to say that I'm also pleased to be supporting this tonight. And thank you to Councillor Van Tilburg for bringing it forward. I know how hard we've all been working towards addressing some of the situations that we're facing within our community. And I think this is a great way to have another way to support citizens in our community. And it's going to all the right people to review this. So we'll come back with some good answers, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you. And staying in council chambers, I have Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to age myself here. I was here when Mike Harris government closed Birch. I still have the T-shirt "Save Birch." I remember protesting to save Birch at the same time they closed St. Joseph's Hospital. You know, Birch was a facility that actually where you went for a small crime, but you learned to work. You worked the fields, you worked the animals. They raised food, and I believe they even made a profit. So the first thing to do to get rid of was get rid of the crops and get rid of the animals. Now, of course, they're working at a loss now because there's no revenue coming in. It's all expenses. Now you got a reason to close it. So it was closed, as Councillor Martin says, in favor of a large penitentiary where what used to be our local, someone stole something or did some petty crime, actually got punished with some time in Birch and learned a work ethic. And now they learned how to become a better criminal because they went to places where other criminals were much more in-depth criminals, and they learned more about that. As far as the mental health and treatment goes, you know, with the province and even us, you know, the treatment it's not full circle treatment. You know, you go to the treatment center, you get treatment, you know, and then they say, okay, Richard, see you later. Where do I go? I don't have a home. I go back to the only people I know, my friends, and they're still on the drug. They're still addicts. And everything I've read says that most addicts reoffend 7 times before they're ever to be successful, if they're ever to be successful even. So a treatment center really needs wraparound services. And the CAO and the mayor know I've been working on something, and we'll bring it to council if it's even possible. But we need a treatment center where you can have treatment and you go into housing directly. Temporary housing, but housing enough so that until your treatment is really secured, and then you commit to volunteer back into treatment. To those, the best person to help someone that's an addict is a recovered addict, a recovering addict, because you're always recovering. When you're an addict, you're always recovering. So, you know, we need a model that's different. And everything I've read all over North America, no one is really following up with a full circle model of treatment. It's all, and all the people in the industry are, they're mean their damnedest. They're working their hardest. And the system is just sort of piecemeal, you know, a piece here and a piece there. It's not connected. There isn't full circle accountability and standards almost anywhere. And I can tell you a story privately from a police officer. And I said to the police officer, well, this catch and release, you're going to pick these guys up that are breaking and entering around the corner. They're stealing all the aluminum and all the air conditioners from all the businesses in my ward. And what's going to happen to them? Well, you know, they're going to bring them to the police station. They're going to book them, and catch and release says you got to release them. They'd be released. And when they go to jail, this police officer now, you know, at a full wages has got to wait in the courts until that case is heard, if it's heard. And what does it get heard? Not that day, not the next time either. So we're spending a lot of money and time on our police officers and our police department, spending staff in the court system. I guess that's how we're getting court security, because the province isn't funding it. At least they weren't last I looked. So the system is broken, and it costs us more and more. And every time we try to address it, because it's not being addressed holistically anywhere. I'm not sure if anybody wants to, you know, at any government level, because I'm not seeing it happen. So I congratulate Councillor Van Tilburg and Councillor Samwell for their endeavor here, and I will support it. I just hope the province supports it.
Thank you. And moving off into virtual world, we have Counselor Linda Hunt. I'm here virtually. This is a good news all around night, but I do want to say mental health and addictions and correction facilities, all of these ministers that we've got noted in this resolution. We're also looking again at an entire series of systems that are chronically underfunded, and as a result are failing. They're failing our citizens. They're failing our businesses that are being repeatedly victims of crime, and these crimes are being committed so that people can feed their addiction, and it's just a vicious cycle. So I'm going to support it. I wish that I had some faith that that our resolution would make a difference, but I just feel that we are just mired in what's just a generational catastrophe that is. I just don't know where, as Councillor Van Tilburg has said, the vicious cycle. I just don't know where the vicious cycle is ever going to end.
Thank you so much.
And seeing no further speakers, I'll just say a few words. Counselor Van Tilburg, when I read this, I was like going, yes, 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 yes. I was excited about it. And I really hope someone takes notice of this resolution. And it's unreasonable to expect that an individual whose mental capacity has been altered, whether that's from drugs or from alcohol, whether they're in the middle of a mental health crisis, that they can make decisions about their own health and safety. And I think it's time that we take notice of this, not just here in Brantford, but across Canada. So I really do hope someone picks up on this and that we can explore this further provincially and federally, and so happy to support it. And I thank you for the work that you've done on this. And not seeing any additional speakers, I will go ahead and call the vote on this.
Thank you. Item 7.2 carried unanimously. All those councillors voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Celeste, McCreary, Carpenter, Samwell, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Secolia, Mayor Davis.
Thank you. There are no notice of motions on the agenda tonight. Just a reminder that you want to get your notice of motions in for the next Committee of the Whole Planning and Administration meeting this Thursday at 9 a.m. This meeting is now adjourned.